Thank you. Hi. All right. I am closing out the main stage. No jokes about being between you and wine, because you can actually get it out there and just bring it in. So I am going to talk about culture today. So first and foremost, I am not a culture guru per se. The way that we hit culture at Women 2.0, we're first of all born out of Silicon Valley. We've dealt for over a year, since 2006, with gender diversity, gender equality in the tech space, and diversity and inclusion in the tech space. So needless to say, culture has really always been in our vernacular, whether it's about inclusive workplaces or not. For many of my audience, culture is either a good thing or it's a miserable thing. It's the reason we do or do not get raises. It's the reason we do or do not stay in jobs or take jobs. So culture is a really important thing in the work that I do. We also just officially opened up our diversity and inclusion arm about six months ago. As you can imagine, dealing with gender equity, you sort of naturally progress into the diversity and inclusion space. We'd been doing a lot of it informally, and so we officially do that now with many of our clients in the industry. The other reason I'm going to talk to you about culture is 2017 was quite a year for the tech industry, especially if you were in the US. Who out there is coming from the US? Not too many. Well, I'm going to tell you the story of 2017 for us last year. So 2017 essentially started out with a disgruntled programmer, a female disgruntled programmer at Uber, who exposed quite publicly the toxic work environment. It was one that she had tried to work on internally. This blew up everywhere. Uber got completely slammed for the first time last year. They had a rough year themselves last year for a lot of stuff. That then went into a male engineer at Google wrote what they are deeming as the anti-diversity memo. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. Google also was under the chopping block for not addressing gender pay gaps, and they had to go in front of federal court for that. We then had a swath of sexual harassment accusations and heads rolling in the VC space. That was all before Me Too. By the time Me Too came, the tech industry was flipping tired. So culture became a really front and center issue in the tech space, especially in US last year. And unfortunately, it was an issue for all the wrong reasons. A lot of these companies that had spent, frankly, the last decade or two talking about culture, they were giving money to, organizations like ourselves and talking about diversity movements and hiring and that sort of thing, came out that they actually had a pretty toxic work environment internally. So 2017 was shit. That's great. It really exposed the fact that there was still a pretty gaping culture gap and that a lot of people weren't taking it seriously. I do want to say a caveat. There are many companies who have taken this seriously for a long time, but frankly, they are fewer than the ones who really haven't addressed this head on. So I want to talk about why culture is not only just good, but it's really important and can be a really real powerhouse for your company. So the culture gap. What we found from last year through our work with clients, through just stuff that happened in the industry, we have three types of leaders, three types of companies, and how they deal with culture. The first one's proud. These are the people that think whatever their culture is, whether it's good, whether it's mediocre, whether it's really horrible, that's the way to do things, and they're pretty unwilling to change. Those guys, you're on your own, sorry. Then we have Apathetic. These are the people or the companies that don't actually think that culture really matters. They think it's sort of like, okay, we'll sort of do our little culture thing, and it doesn't really affect business. We'll glaze over it, and that sort of thing. And then the last are the companies or people who are unaware. They are actually unaware of the fact that their workplaces are not supporting their employees. They're unaware of the effects that it has on companies. They're unaware of things like, oh my gosh, female engineers don't come here for a reason. So this is sort of a broad sweep of a lot of what's actually happening in the tech industry and many other industries right now. Additionally, what we found was the way that a lot of companies had dealt with culture was a little bit of snooze fest. All these words up here, these are what you find as the most common words for people when they describe their culture. I ask you guys, what do these mean? Do they differentiate your company? Like, what is excellence? And doesn't every company want to be excellent? Doesn't every company want to be high quality and winning? These are words that people didn't take a lot of time into thinking really how they impact their own companies. They would put it into handbooks. Your employees would get handbooks, may or may not read them. But again, not a lot of time was put into stressing, talking about, and really instilling culture, even if they had the best intentions of having a great workplace culture. So I want to talk about where a culture can go and where it can really take your company. So, Zappos. Everybody knows Tony Hsieh and Zappos. He's known for culture. He wrote a book on it. He runs his company with culture at the middle. And he's done quite well with that. Does anybody know what this second company is, Link Exchange? This was the first company that Tony Hsieh had. He sold it to Microsoft for a nice, healthy, hefty sum, but he ended up selling it to Microsoft because he ultimately realized that the company had grown large enough with what he deemed as being an absolutely horrible, toxic workplace, and he couldn't turn it around. And he said, I'm done. I don't want to do this. This is not the company that I want to run. He sold it, and he put all of his efforts into culture into Zappos. This is his second company. And it's interesting. He actually states that he knew that the company culture was irreversible by the time they got to 100 employees in this first company, which is an interesting number. As companies are growing and growing and into the thousands, there are points at which a lot of these things are going to be a lot harder to turn around. So Tony spent a lot of time on that. Here's one of the reasons Tony probably thought that was really important. 33%, that's the percentage of an employee's life that he or she spends at work. Now, that's your overall statistic. I'm absolutely positive that if you're in startups, it's going to be more. Now, let's knock out the sleep time for that, and let's talk about your waking moments. I'll just go ahead. This is a rough gut check. It doesn't really matter what the percentage is, but let's say it's 70% of your employees' waking life is spent at work. So what does that really mean? Okay, it means they should be comfortable. We should make them happy. We should make them motivated and that sort of thing. What else does it mean? It means that 70% of their brain's energy, their brain power, is going towards work. It's going towards building products. It's going towards marketing. It's going, whatever their role is, 70% of their brain power is going into that job, that role, that company. 70% of their emotional intelligence and their emotional output is going into that company. The way that they interact with their colleagues, the way they interact with customers, everything. That is an interesting way to look at this time that people spend. People spend more time on average with their managers or again, their reports, than they do with their families. That's a serious commitment of everything that makes up a person. This is where Cameron from Airbnb, I don't know if anyone was sitting in the audience, he set me up nicely when he said, you will never have technology if you don't have the people. And I think that's super important here. And it's more than just hands and busy work and people to create stuff. So this quote, high-performing companies should strive to create a great place for great people to do great work. Great. Let's put that into an equation. Great people plus great place plus great people equals great work. It is not great place plus great people plus great work. This is an equation, which means if one of those is 0, then you're going to have half of what you need to get to the great work, or you're going to have a no addition. So this is a really important thing to do. This is more than just hiring people with the right skill set. It's really about what are those people spending that 70% of themselves doing to put towards this company, and how can we create the best system in which to make that 70% the absolute best 70% that we can, because it's going to make the best work and it's going to make our company successful. So a couple of the basics. This is what, when people think about bottom line and culture and how it affects your bottom line, these are the 3 buckets that people cite the most. And I did a huge Google search prepping for this talk. And I got to tell you, these were the 3 that popped up probably 95% of the time. Hiring and retention, it's a pretty easy one. Again, that's essentially marketing. That's essentially saying we have a culture here that we want you to buy into, that's going to support you, and we need to convince you that that is so. Now, it's not as cynical as just marketing dollars, but essentially that's one way that culture can make your company, make your employees or your future employees feel really good about going to work and continuing to work for your company. Productivity is a big thing. Productivity is serious. So when you can create a more productive workplace because you're putting in a system that supports them, that will impact your bottom line. But let's push it a little bit further. I'm going to use 2 quick examples. 2 brands, TechX, which may or may not be a very large company out of Silicon Valley that many of you have on your phone. A story of a gentleman who worked there. He after last year, he wanted to go into the workplace. He wanted to talk about gender. And his first statement was, I can't do it. I'm afraid to even talk about it at work. I'm afraid I'm going to get annihilated. I don't know what to say. So he shut up. Bloomberg, this is a company we work with, they have a different situation. End of last year, they had a male engineer who said, shoot, this is a serious issue. You want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create an internal group of all of our engineering team. We're going to create male to female mentee and mentor relationships. We're going to make sure that we all talk about how we can create the best environment possible for our female engineers, how we can support them as men, et cetera, et cetera. Great use case. So how, though, can this translate into actual impact on your bottom line? Because if you think about it, that's, again, a person-to-person. But imagine those 2 teams trying to talk about solving a problem with their product. Which one, if you are timid to be able to talk, and there isn't a space for you to be able to talk, how quickly or how effectively are you going to be able to solve a product issue? How accountable are people going to have, or how accountable are people going to be if they don't feel like they can really sort of own a topic amongst their friends and really lead a discussion and really talk about whether it's good or bad about that internally? How is that going to be in team problem solving, in team ownership issues? Candor, that's pretty obvious in this case. Communication. Open communication channels increase productivity more than collective team intelligence. You could get the smartest people in the room together, and if they don't know how to communicate, then they're going to be worthless against a team of a lesser, quote, pedigree who does know how to communicate. You also get buy-in and you get comfort. And I'm just about out of time, so I'm going to speed up. I put that little car there because I wanted to indicate ownership. When you own a car, how different does that feel from when you rent a car or lease a car? I don't know about you, but I just ended my first and only lease of a car because I didn't feel like I treated it as well as I would have if I had owned it. So sorry, I'm getting a little glitchy here. So lastly, Tony Hsieh. To summarize, at Zappos, we really view culture as our #1 priority. We decided that if we get the culture right, most of the stuff, like building a brand around delivering the very best customer service, it'll just take care of itself. So quick summary, if you can also be getting all of the internal impact that you can from creating a good culture, and a team that works well together, and you really focus on that, and you get problem solving down, you get more efficient, you get more direct, et cetera, it builds outward. If you can do that, it means that you have a sales team that's able to communicate and effectively with customers, clients, users. They're able to up that, the acquisition, up relationships, up at retention. All of that seeps out into the outside world, into the work that they're doing. You got more sales, fewer marketing dollars, and an increase in brand loyalty. So this is hard stuff. It's emotional, it's difficult, it takes a hell of a lot of commitment. I do hope that all of you are thinking about your cultures. I hope that you think beyond just doing the right thing. That is a good thing to be thinking about, but there's way more to culture, way more to putting your humans in the center of your company, because they can really drive your company if you do it right. And that's it. And I do have my email up here. I very seriously would like you to email me for anything. And also in the Q&A question, please feel free to ask me about gender stuff and D&I stuff too. So.
Awesome. Thank you. I think